6 or 8 people these days that can win a Grand Prix. The moment it's hand, but you know, you never know what will happen in the final session today, so then we see who is quick and who is slow.
Certainly not to take anything away from Nicky, but he just had everything going for him.
Andretti is certainly the man in form today.
James Hunt, maybe he can win, or Niki Lauda.
James has got to be obviously one of the favourites, Mario Andretti, Niki Lauda, Judy Scheckter.
And maybe me, why not?
But then, you know, it's like always, there's everybody around. John Watson's been in top form this year and has got a very, very good car. Niki Lauda was second quickest today and is looking very good, so they're all there.
Beach, California, start of the Formula One season in the Northern Hemisphere. This is race 4 in a globe-spanning series of 17 Grand Prix events to determine the world's driving championship, the richest, most coveted, most prestigious title in motor racing. And twisting circuit of city streets with a top speed on the straights of 170 miles an hour. What sort of man does it take to live on the limit for 200 miles in this most dangerous of sports? The man whose cars have won 6 world championships, Lotus team boss Colin Chapman, knows the answer.
All drivers are different. They all have different characteristics. Obviously, you need a driver who is fairly quick. You don't necessarily need to have the quickest, because it isn't always the quickest driver that wins the races. Obviously, to win, you've got to finish. And so you really want a driver who can put up a consistently very, very good performance rather than one who occasionally puts up a brilliant one. A driver, above all, has got to be one who is consistent and who is a good communicator, because otherwise the team, the backup behind the driver, isn't necessarily able to get the best out of the car or to do the best for the driver without being able to get good, consistent testing and good, consistent information from the driver as to the way the car is behaving while he's driving it.
Even though you might be slow.
Right now?
Does it feel like that?
Well, I wasn't trying as hard, you know. On a straight coming on past Abbey there yesterday, it seemed like I was getting a few more revs. How come I'm not getting the times? Weren't they worthwhile? Nothing?
Oh, I'm sorry, you were doing 20.2. Yeah, we thought you just...
Getting a championship-winning race car to the checkered flag is a cooperative effort between pit crew and the superstar drivers they rarely see away from the race circuit. Teddy Mayer, McLaren team manager.
It's difficult. They have certain commitments and we have a lot of work to do, so we don't see each other constantly, and both of our drivers move a fair distance from our factory. But obviously at a race you try and do the best you can and communicating, and that's a very important part of our job.
There's got to be a mutual trust, a mutual belief in each other's ability to do the job well and to get it done. In theory, of course, the training sessions are for the drivers to acclimatise themselves to the circuit and to make sure that they're happy to go motor racing. But in actual fact, most of the time spent in training is really optimising the car to suit the prevailing conditions. And then the driver settles down and tries to do his quick lap or get his good position and so on.
It's a matter of getting the car right, you know, setting it up and get it all lined up nicely and beautiful so it's easy to drive, and then you're off.
Most of the race is run, and this Long Beach Grand Prix is already in the history books as a motor racing classic. World champion James Hunt has crashed at the first corner and is struggling to get back among the leaders. South African Jody Scheckter, number 20 in the Wolf, has led from the line from Mario Andretti, number 5 in the Lotus, and Niki Lauda in the Ferrari number 11. There's less than a second between them, but Scheckter has a deflating front tire, and Andretti is pushing closer and closer. Scheckter can't hold the pace, and the American powers through with 3 laps to go. The crowd goes wild. Lauda gets passed into second, and Scheckter in the Wolf is struggling towards the flag with a front tire in shreds. Andretti crosses the line and becomes the first American driver to win an American Grand Prix. Colin Chapman's cap is in the air.
And of course, the driver's personality comes into it a great deal. In the way he works in the team, he encourages the rest of the team. He's not temperamental or aggressive to the people around him and so on. Just got to be a regular nice guy who drives like hell.
Midsummer, a hot day at Silverstone, England. 9 races and thousands of hard miles into the Grand Prix season. The championship is still within reach of half a dozen drivers.
Yeah, Silverstone's all fast corners. There are no slow ones here.
Well, it's different. It's a fast circuit, and yet you've got to you can't run a car in conditions for a very fast circuit. You need to have a very good engine, I think, and careful for overtake, because you can overtake easy.
Silverstone is one of the circuits where overtaking is easier, in fact, so top speed's important to be able to pass people just before you come into a corner.
And if you try and you've made a mistake, you have an accident very bad, I think, and it's very difficult to overtake here.
Barely a wheel turns in Grand Prix racing without a drama of some kind, but the story of Niki Lauda is special. Less than a year ago, he was given last rites following a terrible crash. But he's come back to seek his second championship in 3 years. Incredible determination has brought him back to top form. Race with him at Silverstone.
After the pits, the third gear right-hand corner, which is fairly easy. Then is a very quick left-hand corner, which goes flat in 5th. Then you come to Beckett's. Very important corner, because after that a long straight comes, so you have to try to set up your car very well for this place to develop good top speed at the end of the straight. Fourth gear right-hand corner, fairly quick. And the next one is exactly the same, I would say a difficult one. Then you come back to the start and finish where the chicane is, which is rather difficult too. So it's a difficult place because it's very rough and a lot of high-speed corners, so it's not an easy circuit. You know, we had some problems setting up our car, and it seems to go a little bit better here in Silverstone, but you know, the final session will be today, and then we have to see where we end up on the grid.
In the crowd of 100,000 are some of yesterday's champions. Jackie Stewart, Sterling Moss, Jack Brabham, who've come to see today's British Grand Prix.
WR1, car number 20, with 18.85. All these times incredibly close together.
Just as the driver goes onto the grid isn't really a time to start talking to him too much about the motor race. You might discuss about how he's going to get home or what he did the night before or something, but you wouldn't really talk about racing.
I like not to be bothered very much. I like to be left alone with my own thoughts and keep a clear mind, so to speak. And I just like to get into a moment of concentration, you know, so I can try to touch base on all the particular areas that need attention right at the start, to be able to do it properly and clean and clearly iron out the priorities in my own mind.
Just nervous, you know, and get on with other things. I try and relax, take my mind off the race, or put it on if I do. I'm mainly building my concentration. That's what you do, but how you do that is a personal thing, and it depends on whether it's too good or too bad.
And another Frenchman, Patrick in his first throw ever.
And then just try to tell yourself that the race is not one lap, it's 68 laps. And you got to be there, you got to finish to be able to win a race.
The quickest car around the circuit is the one that's more likely to win the race, which means a faster speed through the corners and really through the swerves rather more than corners. The curves is where you can pick up a lot of speed, particularly when these swerves lead onto a straight, because the car fastest through the corner onto a straight is the car that's fastest all the way down the straight. Speed isn't really what you're after in a racing car so much as lap time, and so it's really our own requirement to generate high cornering forces.
In the all-red Brabham Alfa Romeo number 7, John Watson is turning in a dazzling performance.
It's been something in the past. Being favourite is not always a good thing to be. It's sometimes better to start from behind or one place behind and come through strong and win the race that way.
Today, Watson looks unbeatable. Niki Lauda in the Ferrari is holding second place, but James Hunt in the McLaren number 1 is pressing close. Carlos Reutemann in the second Ferrari and French-Canadian Gilles Villeneuve are early callers at the pits. And the turbocharged Renault quits with a blown engine early in its first race. And the race ends in the safety catch fencing for Patrick Depailler in the six-wheel Tyrrell. Hunt pulls his McLaren closer to Lauda and then past the Ferrari into second place.
Well, I don't believe in luck or history repeating itself, but particularly we haven't had a particularly good season so far. The car hasn't gone that well, and we haven't had a lot of luck, but we've been persevering, we've been working very hard, and so all I can say is that I'm guardedly hopeful.
Watson is lapping at over 130 miles an hour with 170 down the straights, clear of Hunt. While back in the pack is Jacques Lafitte.
Well, I think I stay maybe behind, and I wait what happened exactly after 20 or 30 laps.
But the Ligier is starting to sound like a bag of nails, and the little Frenchman is well behind the leaders. Hunt goes through, but where's Watson? Once again, the Brabham has fuel problems. Reigning world champion James Hunt bursts into the lead, to the delight of the British crowd. Watson takes on more fuel and rejoins the race, but he's out of the points. Hunt has a 12-second lead. In 8 races, he's finished only 3 times. Lotus hopes fade when Andretti comes in with a blown engine. Then Jody Scheckter pulls in the Wolf with the same problem. James Hunt, Niki Lauda, then Gunnar Nilsson in the other Lotus. The young Swede is in great form. James Hunt takes the flag. It is his day, and this dashing, gregarious young Englishman enjoys it to full measure. Yet Lauda, Andretti, and Scheckter still block his way to repeating his 1976 championship. Watkins Glen, deep in the lush hills of upstate New York. With 3 races remaining, Lauda can clinch the championship here. He must finish in the top 6 to claim the title, but this is a major challenge. He is embroiled in a dispute with his own Ferrari team after announcing that he will drive for Brabham next season. And to make matters worse, heavy rain clouds hang over the track. The final practice is held in rain. The race is sure to be wet. Wet for the crowds, wet for the drivers, and wet weather racing is a driver's nightmare.
Well, the main strategy in the wet weather is you've got to look after yourself. Concentration, obviously, is a premium. And you've got to look after your tyres and the car, because you're also being aware of the changing weather conditions. If the track dries out, one's got to be thinking very hard about when to make the pit stop to go onto dry tyres.
Well, wet race is always very unpredictable race, in my opinion.
I don't know. It's very difficult in the wet because the circuit don't drain very well, and it's a lot of problems.
There's so many different setups you can go into. You can go full wet settings, or you can go dry settings, hoping that they perhaps would dry later on in the race, and then you could have some sort of an advantage. And like I said, there's so many ways to go, and it's wide open when it's wet.
Lotus driver Gunnar Nilsson takes a look at the soaking track and the dangers it holds in the rain.
Like all tracks, when it's wet, you've got to be very careful. And a place like this, it's very bumpy, right? And the water will go there, and it will stay there in puddles. And when you come, maybe you hit them with 130, 40, 50 miles an hour, the car will just aquaplane. There is no way you will ever get a grip down to the surface. I mean, 9 out of 10 wet races, the track will dry up, and what you have to do is you have to play it very carefully and safe, and when it dries, then you go. Try to do it all in the rain, you know. It's very tempting because you think, oh God, the other guys are braking early and all this. But before you know it, man, you're just sitting out there in the Armco somewhere, and then it's all too late. And you feel really like a, you know, really like a fool. But it's so tempting. That's why rain is a problem too. That's where the experienced guys, they can really get a jump on young guys there. But then you can never do anything about the spray, which is always hanging around, you know. If you start on the front row, you're okay, but from the second row and down, when that flag drops, it's like you're sticking your head in a milk bottle. You just cannot see the front of your own car. I mean, you're asking for it really to drive in that weather. I don't know. It's not very nice. I'd rather be sitting in an office.
Young German driver Hans Stuck in the Brabham changes at the last moment to wet weather tires. Stuck has qualified second to Hunt and insists he likes racing in the rain. He's in a minority of 1.
No one really likes racing in the wet. It's something we have to do because, of course, you know, the public are there and they expect to see a show and so on. The cars, well, firstly, of course, we put wet weather tyres on, which are a totally different construction to the dry weather tyres, and in fact wouldn't last more than 5 miles probably, 2 laps at the most, in dry conditions. And then we have to change the settings in the cars quite a bit. We have to change the brake balance ratio because in the wet you don't need so much braking on the front. We change the wing settings, we change the roll stiffness, the damper settings, mixture control, and there are a great many settings that are changed on the car to make it more suitable for wet conditions.
Hans Stuck in the Brabham number 8 has the race well under control and is clear of Hunt. Lauda is being cautious, holding 6th. Hans Stuck widens the gap, but his clutches fail, and he spins after missing a gear change. Abruptly, his race is over. Hunt in the McLaren is left with a 14-second advantage over Mario Andretti in the Lotus. Scheckter is 3rd. Lauda is a comfortable 4th with the championship in sight. Hunt is taking detours to find puddles that will keep his tires cool enough to let him finish. He loses a 12-second lead to Andretti, but just makes it to the finish line. Lauda gets his vital points. He's the new world champion.
Of course, the big problem is when you've got a race that's sort of half wet and then becomes dry, or it starts dry and becomes wet, because you then end up running with a lot of compromised settings, and that's why you frequently get unexpected results in wet, dry, wet races, because in the lottery of all the various options, 1 or 2 cars have picked the right combination and all the others are slightly off. And so you can always reckon that a wet race or a damp race produces a surprise winner, as a rule.
Lauda is champion again. Andretti has won more races, and Scheckter has won as many, but the Austrian has more points due to consistent high finishes.
I think the car was really capable. It was a championship car from the beginning this year.
The man that wins the championship is going to be the man that's winning races.
Unfortunately, it'll never be in the history books that way.
Already they are looking to the year ahead. Perhaps the last word should rest with a new champion and his plans for next season.
Try to win it, because that's the only way to do. The good thing in motor racing is try to win.
The World Driving Championship for Formula One cars was established 25 years ago, racing the Grand Prix circuit across the European continent and in North and South America. Such drivers as Fangio, Ascari, Stewart, Clark, and Fittipaldi, who carried the title home to places like Argentina, Italy, Great Britain, Brazil, and Austria. One American has won the title. One American in 25 years. His name is Phil Hill. This is his story.
America's Only Champion is brought to you by British Leyland, makers of these world-famous sports cars, Jaguar, MG, and Triumph, and by the makers of Champion spark plugs. Champions are #1 in Formula One racing, so take a tip from the people who win. Fill her up with champions.
To free himself from the confines of the conventional sedan, man has tried art, surgery, even violence. Now, MGB has a beautiful solution. The world's biggest sunroof, plus a 1798cc engine, front disc brakes, rack and pinion steering. Break out of your mold in MGB, the wide-open sports car from British Leyland.
The place is Monza, Italy. These are Grand Prix cars, running under the current International Formula One. They're the fastest, most technically advanced racing machines on Earth. The drivers are an elite international squadron, competing for the world's driving championship.
How's it going?
One day not so long ago, this man, a Californian named Phil Hill, enjoyed unrivaled attention from the Monza throngs. At this track, in a moment of bittersweet triumph, he became the Formula One driving champion of the world, the only American ever to win motor racing's most honored title. Now, 14 years later, he has returned to the hectic Grand Prix fraternity, an older but well-remembered alumnus.
How are you?
Hello,
How are you?
Nice
to see you, too.
Nice
How's
to
it
see
going,
you, Bill.
How are
Very
you?
nice to see you.
I haven't had a chance to talk to the padrone yet. He's
What is he called?
Derek. Derek.
Hello, Vitello.
How are you, padrone? Commendatore.
Phil, I suppose because Monza has figured in so many high points in your career that there must be a very special feeling that you get when you come back here.
Well, I do get a peculiar feeling. There is a strange ambiance here. I don't know whether it's the place itself, the Italian people, or whether it's my personal experience. Having virtually begun my Formula One career here and then won the championship here, it's always given me a peculiar feeling to come back. They've done quite a bit to change the circuit. We used to use the banking, of course, as part of the circuit, which added another 2.6 miles to it. And the banking now has become so difficult for the modern cars to go around, and also it's not in a good, it needs a lot of repair, that it's not used.
Unlike most American racing drivers, Phil Hill's greatest victories came to him in Europe, far away from his home in Santa Monica. His love of cars gave his life purpose from the moment he quit college to become a foreign car mechanic and sometime race driver. The intensity of his involvement, in its way as temperamental and powerful as the automobiles that consumed his interest, qualified him in 1950 for special schooling at the fabled Jaguar Works in Coventry, England. Former Jaguar managing director and competitions manager Lofty England remembers.
We got along quite well because he, as you will realize, is a chap who really knows a lot about motor cars. And it is unusual, in fact, I think. There are not very many drivers who are really technically minded or really very good mechanics. But it's been nice to watch Phil, and I've always liked him. I liked his attitude to things. He must have driven an enormous number of miles in races, in all sorts of motor cars. Never, to my knowledge, been involved in any serious accident. Not the sort of chap who went off the road, yet the sort of chap who was capable of winning a 24-hour race, or a short distance race, or a Formula One race, of which there are not a great many.
Now there you are, you see. We managed to find one for you.
Just exactly like...
Just the right color.
Those are the same colors exactly
That's
that
right.
mine was. They called it, wait a minute, they called it black, red, and biscuit. Is that what they call the interior?
That's it. You'll find the steering the other side on this one if you'd like
see
to
that,
drive it.
yeah.
This Jaguar XK120 holds special meaning for Phil Hill. It was an identical sister car, one of the first to be built, that brought Phil his first road racing victory.
More power, something like that?
That's right.
This is a beauty.
Finally, I think high lift camshafts, dual exhaust, wire wheels.
Can we drive it?
Sure you can, yeah. Get in.
Look, this really brings back old...
You remember how to do this,
I remember exactly how to do it.
Hill knew the XK120 would be unbeatable in California sports car competition. Typical of his intense will to achieve, he managed to acquire the car.
I arranged with the company that I worked for in California that I would pick up one of the cars that was part of their very small allotment, and that they were going to finish the sale of my MG, and I borrowed money from relatives in California and was able to get the car. Managed to get passage through Rolls, got me a place on the Queen Mary, and arranged for the car was to go on as personal baggage. And in May of 1950, I arrived along with the car in New York, went through customs, drove the car across the United States, and I raced it. My first road race win was in that car, and that was at Pebble Beach in November of 1950. So I never did say, I'm going to be a racing driver, or I'm going to be a good racing driver, or I'm going to be one of the best racing drivers. I never even said I'm going to be a racing driver. But the feedback that I got from racing, especially when I first began, my personality needed it so tremendously that I couldn't see anything of the dangers or anything. In other words, I could have just wiped myself out in the first few hours of participation. The feedback was so tremendous. I mean, I needed it so much. To do it with some degree of success, you know, and right off the bat I was pretty successful. Whether I had to be successful or whether I really am little by little coming to the conclusion that most people could do this job of driving race cars pretty well. It's the have-to-do-it aspect, the compulsiveness of it, is a much bigger part.
Hill's own brand of compulsiveness earned him better and better rides. By 1958, he was an established member of the great Italian team of Ferrari. He won the first of 3 Sebring victories that year, followed by a win at the Le Mans 24-hour race.
Oh, it was just the most fabulous thing that ever happened to win Le Mans. There was something to finish there at all, and 24 hours being a long time. It rained. I never did like driving in the rain, didn't have a lot of experience at it, but I got along very well in the rain.
He got along very well, to say the least. During the downpour, he drove flat out, giving him a reputation as a master rain driver that he never lost. His win at Le Mans, plus earlier victories, opened the door to the exclusive world of Formula One competition. His first Grand Prix ride with Ferrari was at Monza in September 1958. Unawed in the company of men like Mike Hawthorne and Sterling Moss, this sports car driver from California led the opening laps, then drove on to finish third. Notice had been served. An intense young American would challenge for the championship of the world. These twisting Apennine mountain roads in northern Italy once served Phil Hill and his Ferrari teammates as a test track for their racing cars. Now they're a path back to his past, a path that leads to the legendary fiefdom of Enzo Ferrari at Maranello. Here, Hill spent 6 years as a team driver, watching the world's fastest racing cars being handcrafted in the vast Ferrari competition shops. Like his escort, engineer Franco Gozzi, the people and place are little changed.
The factory itself hasn't changed all that much, but the scientific way that they go about things has just gone way ahead from where it was when I was there. I mean, granted, they were, even at that time, they were supreme as far as engine development and everything was concerned, but they were isolationists. They didn't like to look at what the rest of the world was doing in a technical way, especially concerning chassis, and consequently, we're way behind all the time. I mean, we won in spite of clumsy, ill-handling chassis. Was it? No, nothing. What thrills me is to see the tenacity, you understand, the year after year after year of progress, you know, and the devotion that he has to this concept is...
I mean, the old man is really devoted.
Yeah. How many people in this day and age for all intents and purposes, give their life for a cause like that. Yeah, yeah. Ciao!
Oh, no, come andiamo?
Bene, bene, grazie.
Lo diverti sempre.
Ma come va?
Quando è che vinci un auto piccolo?
Ha dei soldi, è molto ricco, il signore è diventato papà 2 volte.
No, guarda, le mani, sono mani di un lavoratore.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci, ci vediamo. A very large part of the employees and workers there have a devotion that sort of goes on year in, year out. And I met a lot of the fellows that used to be on the racing teams, and apparently they get awful tired of that. You know, that coming and going, that unbelievable franticness about having to get somewhere on time, and fights with border people and, you know, customs and all that sort of stuff, and then things going wrong, and then back home again, and even the enticement of a possible winning a race or something is not sufficient for them to want to leave home, because I saw a large number of them that are just, in fact, the whole team, the racing team, is new. And the old guys are sitting at home now and saying that they're very glad to do it.
This is the same radio of Monza.
Very
Strong doses of technology have altered the Ferrari works. Where Hill and his associates once shook their cars down on open roads, a vast new test track has been built during the intervening years. Fast laps in a 170-mile-an-hour Ferrari GT car confirm it. The touch is still there. It's the first time Hill has driven a Ferrari on a track in 13 years. It was 1962 when he left the team amidst mutual recriminations between himself and Enzo Ferrari, the Iron Duke, whose masterpiece cars he drove. Now Ferrari is a semi-recluse, shielded from a prying world like an aging monarch. In deference to the visit by his former champion, the proud old man grants a rare audience.
Ecco, noi abbiamo qui il vecchio campione, noi ti salutiamo e ti facciamo tanti auguri.
I suppose that when I met him again, I felt that I was sort of more equipped to deal with, the super daddy symbol on a more mature level, I guess, because he did represent that to me. He was the sort of super male power in my life. The feeling was really that he had mellowed with age. Well, I'm not so sure that he really has. I think I was probably a large part of that feeling.
The memories are inescapable. Hill carried Ferrari's prancing horse emblem to victory in Sweden, Venezuela, Sebring, Le Mans, and Buenos Aires. In 1960, at Monza, he became the first American in 39 years to win a Formula One race. A year later, Hill won Le Mans a second time, the Grand Prix of Belgium, in his third Sebring crown. He was approaching the summit of his racing career. Monza, September 1961, the Grand Prix of Italy. Phil Hill and Ferrari teammate Count Wolfgang von Trips were only 1 point apart in their battle for the World's Championship. A long, hard season had eliminated the other contenders, and in the process had frayed nerves, strained friendships. Suddenly, on the second lap of the race, Von Tripp's car touched wheels with Jim Clark's Lotus and spun into the crowd. In a shattering second, 15 people, including Von Trips, were dead. Hill, in the lead, had no idea of the magnitude of the tragedy.
So it's hard enough trying to concentrate on the job at hand in a racing car. When I saw Tripp's car upside down and badly battered, it looked bad, but at the same time I'd seen any number of accidents where drivers had walked away.
Driving impeccably, Hill outdistanced his other rivals. He raced on to an uncontested victory and initial jubilation. Then the gnawing realization that his greatest triumph would always, ironically, be bordered in black.
But when I drove in and saw the face of the chief engineer, Keaty, I knew on an unconscious level then that he was dead. There is no huge emotional shock because you're unconsciously protected from it. The bang of an unexpected death is not there.
Phil Hill's World Championship victory at Monza began a bizarre decline in his Grand Prix career. Aside from winning Le Mans a third time, 1962 was marred by failure. Hill bore the blame, even though other teams were building faster cars than the Ferrari. Some said the Trips affair had affected his driving. Actually, an internal revolt at Ferrari had demoralized and depleted the team. In 1963, Hill shifted to ATS, a new but underfinanced Italian racing team. Then a final try in 1964 with Cooper, whose cars were badly outclassed. Again, it was Hill who was blamed rather than the slow, ill-handling machines. Yet Hill remained a supremely talented endurance driver, a fact not forgotten by Ford when they entered racing with their GT40 sports cars. By now, he'd tired of the long sojourns on the continent and welcomed the chance to spend more time at home. He helped pioneer the multi-million-dollar Detroit effort that would lead to victory at Le Mans in 1966 and 1967. But Hill was not to be a part of the American dominance in endurance racing. The pressures of internal politics in the Ford organization bore heavily.
I was beginning to find the same stuff at Ford that I had disliked so thoroughly at Ferrari, and I just hate that sort of gamesmanship. I probably could manage it better today than I did then, but at that time I just didn't like that stuff. So Jim Hall made me a good offer, and I went there.
Texan Jim Hall, ready to challenge the world's finest racing machines in international competition, selected Hill to drive the revolutionary Chaparral. Hill took to the white coupes with ease, running impressively at Le Mans, Daytona, and Sebring, and winning on such difficult tracks as Germany's Nürburgring.
I really enjoyed working for Chaparral in their business-like way of going about things. Minimum of heroics expected. Heroics being all well and good and things that you're quite willing to involve yourself in if there's some sense behind the whole operation. It isn't just a bunch of insane scrambling.
Back home, he drove the wing Chaparrals in the highly competitive Can-Am Challenge, winning at Laguna Seca in Northern California. In 1967, Hill and Mike Spence won an endurance race at Brands Hatch, England. Amidst the post-race jubilation, no one, least of all Phil Hill, realized that it would be his last professional motor race. Quietly, without a precise moment of decision, it was over.
I never announced my retirement ever, period, to anyone, before or after I retired.
No, we're not getting...
I mean, more and more my brain was putting together this whole prospect of living happily without being a racing driver. And I had been working away at it for years without realizing it. I just sort of backed into my retirement.
This one's going to be another story.
Yeah. Wait a minute. For any number of years, I had been interested in vintage and antique cars and had been acquiring a small stable of cars, and that was, in a sense, my savings. Every now and then would sell one and buy another, and I was very much involved with reproducing pianos at that time, and was acquiring piano rolls. In a nutshell, that's how I got where I am now, where I'm now involved in the restoration of automobiles, and I'm in partnership with another fellow, and I'm making my living doing that, basically.
Most men fight retirement. Phil Hill seems to revel in it. Now married, with a family and a home he denied himself as a driver, a new tranquility has descended over him. Long known for his quixotic temper, his intensity, and his impatient intelligence, he seems to have found peace with his lifelong love of old musical instruments and classic automobiles.
The carburation is just like we thought. Finalmente è arrivata, un po' polverosa.
The old cars have gathered at Laguna Seca for a vintage race. Hill has arrived with a 1937 2.9-liter Alfa Romeo, the very same machine he had driven to victory at the nearby Pebble Beach Road Course in 1951. He'll race again, pressing the old thoroughbred around the circuit in the crisp, forthright style that is his trademark. He treats the car well because Hill, unlike many racing greats, enjoys automobiles. They're more to him than high-speed ego transporters. He drives hard enough to beat the others at Laguna Seca and to receive a victory lane kiss, not from a race queen, but from his wife, Alma. Somehow, for Phil Hill, a man fulfilled, that's more appropriate. I suppose that Niki Lauda winning the World Championship for Ferrari creates a certain kind of special memory from you and Monza on this day.
It certainly does. I think I was the last Ferrari World Champion winner here at Monza, actually, 14 years ago. And it does bring back a lot of memories. There's no question that my involvement with the automobile, especially with the racing side of it, was the only real, genuinely meaningful thing that ever happened to me, that I ever did. And it had a beginning and a middle and an end that were all different, but at the same time they were all very closely tied in a way that it made me as a person. I had that feeling from within.